Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast.
So let's dive a little bit into the science of sourcing products for the folks that are listening. In terms of product research, are you involved in that at all? Or do your customers come to you and say, hey, I want to make this widget. Help me find a factory to make this widget?
So most of the time, companies come to us with their specs and designs ready to go. Sometimes it's a matter of improving production for an existing product line. And that's actually the vast majority of our customers say, hey, I actually want to try to figure out if I can improve my margin, improve my quality, improve my lead time. I'm just ready for a new factory relationship. And that's typically where they'll engage us to utilize our sourcing team to really, ensure that they're getting, the best products at the best price and meeting their lead time expectations as well.
So what advice do you have for the entrepreneur who's already got their idea then? And maybe for whatever reason, they're not going to be your customer. They're going to try and do this on their own in terms of vetting a factory and looking at samples and so forth. What are some of the best practices and some of the gotchas?
Totally. So the main approach is going to be going mostly probably on Alibaba or global sources. You're going to, go onto the search bar. It's going to say products or suppliers. You're going to put it, into as suppliers and search for suppliers that are already in your industry. You then want to find suppliers based on, similar products that they've produced and start communicating with them. I think a lot of times, first time, entrepreneurs or people going out and sourcing a product for the first time, they kind of get scared to communicate with these different suppliers and factories. And at the end of the day, communication is so crucial when it comes to manufacturing and sourcing that I always say, reach out to 10, 20 plus factories through these marketplaces, see their response and just get an initial feel for the reaction. We actually have a program in product sourcing school that helps people dive into that and really, helps them understand the process of manufacturing their product.
All right. So once you've narrowed down the factories, you've gone through a vetting process, you've got a short list of maybe 3, 4, 5. Actually, how many with factories when you get to the sampling phase? For a typical product, that doesn't cost a fortune for each individual product. Like we're not talking about multi-thousands of price per unit. Let's talk about 10, 20, 50 bucks, $100, whatever per unit, something in that neighborhood.
Yep.
How many different factories are you going to get samples from?
Yeah, I would say, typically you're going to get samples from 2 to 3 factories. That's good. I mean, sometimes just one, if there's one that really you think is the best one, just go with that one. It also depends how fast you're trying to move. I mean, sampling is probably, one of the hardest parts to get going because you have to get so many of the specs right. When people produce a product, a lot of times people come to me and say, hey, I've got an idea for a new t-shirt brand. And I say, okay, I could ask you 100 questions about that t-shirt. What's the cut? What's the trim? Like there's so many different questions you can ask about a product. And so until you actually go out and manufacture a product yourself, you don't realize you can really customize anything you want. And so you might get your sample, let's say, of jackets, and you think, oh, I want the zipper, to zip like this instead of like that. And, a lot of times you don't actually think of those possibilities until you get a sample. And so that's why we always say, the best bet when starting a new e-commerce brand is order, 3, 5, 10 products from other companies in your industry and analyze them, see what you can do to improve those products. I think one of kind of the best ways to even, let's say, research new product categories is look at bad reviews. There's got to be some bad reviews, whether it be on Amazon or, someone's Shopify of their product, and see how you can improve because, there's always ways to improve a product. I think nowadays in the Shopify world, brand is so important. But, when it comes to, Amazon, a lot of times, obviously you aren't necessarily selling the brand on Amazon. You're more so selling, the ranking and the reviews and the search and, how you're really able to, become a result for those search terms when people are searching for your product on Amazon.
So once you've got your sampling dialed in and you've made your factory selection, I guess the next logical thing to do is you're going to place your order, and then before it's shipped, you're going to get inspected. And then once it passes inspection, it's going to get shipped.
Yeah, and I know placing a first order is a lot, it's a lot for people because you're doing so much. You know, it's the first time you're typically sending a wire to, you know, China or Vietnam or wherever it may be, and so it takes a lot of, you know, kind of confidence in some to say, okay, I'm wiring this money, let's see what happens, and know that typically, you know, when you're starting out, you're going to have like 30-70 payment terms. So 30% you're going to put down, 70% is typically due upon shipment or upon delivery. And before you pay that remaining balance, that's where you have that third party inspection come in. So, let's say you're a new e-commerce brand, typically, your production budget is going to be, let's say, $5 to $20,000, $30,000. You're going to be risking anywhere from a few $1,000s to $10,000 with that 30%. But you've got that safeguard in place. The third party inspection is really your insurance. And then through production, production is going to last anywhere from 30 to 60 days, typically, depending on your product. And it's not that it actually takes the factory 30 to 60 days to produce your product itself, but it's that the factory has their own supply chain. You got to wonder, where do they get the raw materials to actually put this product together? Factories themselves have a lot of sub suppliers. I think that's something people overlook, is they think, oh, why is it taking so long to produce, my coffee table? Well, your coffee table, that factory that produces your coffee table probably has 10, 15, 20 different sub-suppliers they're working with just to produce that coffee table.
Yeah. Fun little side note. The very first thing I bought off of Alibaba, I got completely fleeced. $2,800 gone.
Gone.
Before they had, Alibaba was pretty young back then, and they didn't really have good quality control in place. And I was not very happy, I got to tell you.
Yeah. Well, I think too, a lot of times, what people don't realize about Alibaba itself is that when you search for a supplier on Alibaba, the one that comes up the highest doesn't mean it's the best factory. It's just the one that's kind of paying Alibaba the most to rank for that keyword. Similar to how you can advertise on Google or Amazon based on search results, based on keywords. It's the same with Alibaba. They have their own, internal advertising platform for these suppliers that, hey, when I search, flip-flop factories, well, this flip-flop factory came out, first result on Alibaba, they must be the best. That is not the case. What actually happens is that flip-flop supplier that came up first result on Alibaba is, paying Alibaba the most for that, to get that position,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's worth a lot of money.
Yep.
All right. So before we wrap up, Nathan, what on the topic we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or so, what's the one thing or a thing that I haven't asked you about that we would be remiss if we didn't discuss, if you can think of one?
I love thinking outside the box when it comes to building and getting attention. And so I've done that, twice in big ways in the past, 3-4 years. One people might have heard of, it was the Conor McGregor fight that he did with Floyd Mayweather. It was, a huge fight. And during one of the press conferences, Conor McGregor wore a pinstripe suit with the leathers, FU going down the sides and pinstripes. And this thing went viral. It was all over the internet. And literally, I saw that night. We put up a website. I don't know if I can cuss on here or not, but it was, fusuits.com. And we got samples of suits made saying FU going down the pinstripes. We got wallets, we got ties. We literally got all these different products, to produce these suits and get these samples. Within a week, we had the samples, we had the site up. It went viral. We were on like Bro Bible, Hypebeast, like every major media outlet you could think of was like, oh, you can now buy, Conor McGregor's FU suit. And we were covered all over the web. And on that webpage, fusuits.com, we had a link, built by Sourcify. If you want to, source and manufacture your own product too, click here. And we got more leads from that, kind of marketing stunt, if you'll call it, than being on TechCrunch, than being on CNBC, than being on CNN. We've been on every, major media outlet, but those marketing stunts, I tell you, they just drive so much virality. And that's what I love. I think, it's not always a long-term sustainable growth play, but especially in the B2B space where you can get a huge surge in potential customers. If you win some of those customers, your ARR is going to grow substantially.
Salesforce is actually super famous for those marketing stunts early on. If you read Mark Benioff's book about how he launched Salesforce, it's just marketing stunt after stunt after stunt. And
that is a great book.
Obviously worked exceedingly well. So Nathan, it's been a pleasure to have you on. For folks who might like to work with you, just go to sourcify.com. I'm sure it's pretty obvious once they get there how they can figure it out. So thank you very much for making some time to be on the Bright Ideas podcast.
Thank you. This was fantastic.